So good afternoon, everybody. We are going to get started because we have a really amazing, stellar lineup. So this next panel is a panel of really useful tools. And we have 2 speakers with us in person, 2 online, and Tao Lan from China. We are going to send you out as a video to watch just to keep this tight. I'll run through the people on the panel just while the rest of people are trickling in. So we're lucky to have Adam Sipthorpe, who is the head of CDR sourcing for Carbonfuture. Ash Goddard, who is the director and facilitator of Climate Clarity, and we'll be talking about the climate education movement sparked by the tool Climate Fresk. And we have Allison Pobrislo with us, who is the founder of Prance Earth and Prance Ocean. And I know, Allison, yes, please come and join us. I knew I'd seen you. And Allison also leads Prance Earth News. And then online we have joining us Gerbrand Haverkamp, who is the executive director of the World Benchmarking Alliance and did a terrific presentation that I was lucky to attend at the World Economic Forum earlier this year. So thank you so much, Gerbrand, for joining us. And finally, we have Berend Smit, who is also going to be virtual, who is a professor at EPFL, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne. So I'm going to begin introducing Adam. And we've just had a fascinating conversation about the voluntary carbon markets and the fact that we're kind of evolving somewhere between 1.0, and Adam, with the reporting and tracking tool that he's going to tell us about today, is helping the markets move to 2.0. So Adam, thanks so much for being with us, and please feel free to deliver at the podium or seated as you prefer.
Great. Thanks a lot, and thanks everyone for coming back after lunch. I appreciate it. So we're on the tools panel, and I hope that means I interpreted it at least as not us as tools, but more what our companies are working on. So I hope that was the right way. Carbonfuture, what do we do? So in our market, we would call ourselves a DMRV provider, so a digital monitoring, reporting, and verification provider. Now, I know in this room that is exactly what we are not doing, because academia and sometimes policy use very different terms or have a very different meaning of MRV than what the carbon markets typically do, because what you say by MRV, we normally say by methodology. But I'll go into that into some detail. My role is head of sourcing or head of supply, which effectively means I look for those projects physically removing carbon from the atmosphere, some of which we've heard of today on the panel. Yesterday, Clarity Tech, for example, use our reporting software in order to run their operations. And really what we try and do is kind of professionalize what is the voluntary carbon market, and what started off as a bit of a cottage industry, but is growing into a relatively large industry and does need to quickly catch up in the way that large industries do in terms of how are they auditable, how are they accountable, and how can you actually show what's happened in these in real time rather than 2 years in the past, which is what used to happen. So who are we? Here you are. You can see what we say is we're a digital infrastructure for durable carbon removal, and by that we mean 5 different technology types typically, which is biochar, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, and direct air capture. They're the 3 that we support today. And then there's also enhanced rock weathering and ocean CDR. I know I've had an interesting conversation over lunch. We will probably support them in the future. We're just waiting a little bit more on the MRV to be more measurable and for the results to align before we'll support those technologies as well. If I skip through, this is where we fall into the supply chain with these projects. So we're not the ones on the ground actually building the projects. We would be terrible at that because we're not engineers. What we are pretty good at is knowing what is required by the standards, what is required by the regulators, and what is required by the buyers in this market. So what the 2 founders started with when they set up the company 5 years ago, they came from the financial markets and from the tech markets, and they wanted to see how can we make this market auditable. So they set up this reporting tool which connects in via the sensors and the middleware to the data that's being physically collected by these durable removal projects on the ground, to be able to collect all of the relevant information to show that this has actually happened, all of the emissions that have either happened with the project or they're removing with the project as well, and then where has that carbon gone, right? If that's biochar, has it been applied to a field? If that's gaseous carbon, have you pumped that underground in a geological aquifer or kind of cured it into a durable product as well? And it kind of solves three purposes in the market. The first being it makes the lives of the suppliers easier, the projects on the ground doing it. They have enough on their plate. These are often first-of-a-kind deployments. A lot of things come up as they're going. We can take their data and we can package it up and make sure that it is ready as long as they're collecting the right data, and we'll go through that with them to get certified and to meet the standards of, be that a Puro, isometric, a different voluntary carbon standard, or also an auditor as well in the future. And in the future, probably CRCF and probably some kind of integration, at least with the UK ETS, possibly with the EU ETS. We'll see where the policies go there as well. To a standard, it means that they get consistent data in a consistent format, rather than receiving it in 8 different formats from different parties. They know that when they provide it, we'll provide it in the same data package at all times. And for a buyer, it means that we take what is an abstract concept, which is a carbon credit, and we bring it back to the real world. We show exactly what has actually happened in real time. So if it's an example of biochar, where did that feedstock come from? Who collected it? What sustainability certification does it have? What is the pyrolysis unit that you've used? Where was that procured from? Who was the manufacturer of that technology? All of the conditions into the production, and then once it's produced, what do you do with the biochar? How long did it stay on site? How did you store it? What did you mix it with? Where did you apply it? That's all tracked on our platform and takes a project from being a carbon credit, which is, let's be honest, something that none of us really understand how much is a ton of carbon in this room, for example, to being a real-life project again, and something that people actually want to support. Here is a bit of an example just of the dashboards of what we have. So you can see the operations in real time of what a project is doing, so they can monitor their operations and see how is it performing. Is it performing as they expected, or is there anything that they need to quickly get on site if they're not on site and check if it's working or not? If you're a financier or an insurer of these projects as well, you can use this information to see the performance of your asset in the market as well. And finally, I just wanted to finish with an example, because I know this is a pretty new concept to the world, right? It's a very new market still. It's only been around, the durable carbon removal market, for, let's say, 4 years. And I'll finish with Microsoft, who are by far and away the largest buyer of durable carbon removals. They are historically very, very rigorous in their due diligence, and they will continue to be, which is great, because you need that from the largest buyer in the market to get the quality up. We have a project in Bolivia with a company called Exomad Green, which brings in its own complications in terms of supply chain transparency, money flows, ensuring that biochar is applied to the fields. And through working with us, we managed to get the trust from Microsoft's trust in the project to show that the feedstock that they're using is sustainably harvested and sustainably sourced. It's then being produced in a robust way and then being sent to the local indigenous communities to be able to use on their site as well. And this has actually led to the largest biochar deal to date. Hopefully it won't be in a couple of years, but this is 1.2 million tons, which we announced back in May, I think. So in a nutshell, yeah, we are the digital infrastructure to try to power this market and to bring it forward from this concept of a voluntary carbon market, which still a lot of people rightly see as quite an intransparent market, to trying to make it as transparent as possible and showing all of the data flows to the relevant parties at a relevant time. Thank you. I have no idea how long I took.
Thank you so much. Such a useful tool. We are going to feature you on our website, so wonderful to hear. Now, my great pleasure to introduce Ash Goddard, and I think we met in Paris at the Al Gore Climate Reality Training, and I had never heard of Climate Fresque, but was incredibly impressed to hear that Ash has trained over 1,000 facilitators. Come on up and tell us all about it.
Thank you. Hi there. I'll be asking for a tiny bit of interaction at the very beginning. So be prepared. Could I have slides, please? So I should have a stand-up routine ready. Ah, there we go. So hello. What I'm here to do today is to offer to be your guide to something called Climate Fresque and exciting set of tools that can be used to get people on board with climate solutions and more. So if you didn't know about Climate Fresque, in about 6 minutes' time, you'll know all about it. So who am I? My name's Ash Goddard. I've been a skier since I was age 2. Last time I was here on campus, I was actually in a skiing competition on the hill there, where we imported a couple of tons of snow and had a freestyle competition. So it's good to be back. It's quite different conditions. And that's really why I got into this field, was because I spent all my life skiing and competing and then realized I've invested this time in something that's got worse and worse and hotter and wetter, and I wanted to be able to do it for a long, long time. Now it's not so important because I found out about the other parts of climate change and felt a great desire to be here. And that got me involved in Climate Fresque, where I'm a blue belt. Unfortunately, you don't physically get a belt. But I also started a non-profit called Climate Clarity that spreads these tools to organizations, universities, and more. So why do we need this tool? What does it achieve, in a way? I'll explain first. Sometimes explaining climate change, I'd liken it to a bit like explaining what your partner does for a living, or maybe when you were younger, what your parents did for a living. You say, yeah, I know how to do that. I know what they do for their job. You know, they go to work, they have meetings, they have Zoom calls sometimes. I think they use Excel, and you realize as you're explaining to someone, I don't have the grasp of how to explain this and understand it and explain it to someone else. So that's what we do in the workshop, is really helping people bring a systemic view to the knowledge they do have so that they can explain and communicate it. How do we do that? Well, first of all, just to check, put your hand up if you've heard of Climate Fresque. Hey, nice to see you there. You can keep your hands up if you've taken part in a Climate Fresque. Yay, we've got 1, 2, good, and a thumbs up. So what is the Climate Fresque? It's a game that we play with cards like these, they're a mini version, to get across the IPCC science with a group of people, where you sit or stand around a table. It was in a New York Times article named as a trendy night out in Paris, but also something that you can take place in boardrooms and universities and more, where you work together with the people there to piece together how does climate change work, what are the impacts. But it's not a lecture, it's very much you as a group taking the cards, taking what you already know and exploring and kind of myth-busting and practicing working with these links. So by the end of, or by the halfway point of the workshop, these 42 cards have roughly been organized into some sort of system like this, where the group has worked through them in 5 rounds to explain how they all link together. And so by the end of it, people, rather than saying, oh yeah, my partner sends emails and they know how to describe climate change in an effective way with their story. But importantly, they've explained it to us as the facilitators, because the facilitator holds the process. They've explained it to us, what are the problems, what's the urgency, and then in the last part, what are the solutions? What can we do about this? And the reason why this is so powerful is because the only form of persuasion that's reliable is self-persuasion. So when people do this, by persuading us as facilitators, they persuade themselves. Were you persuaded? Yeah, still no thumbs up.
I met you in the queue to get into COP 26 in Glasgow. I don't think you remember that, do you?
It leaves an impact.
It did.
This wasn't planned. Most are too. And yeah, where is it used? Apart from queues in Glasgow, it's also used, like I said, in boardrooms, in universities, working with busy bees that need to be involved in sustainability journeys at workplaces, as well as even community centres, gardens. It's really across the board, and that's how it's been delivered to 2 million people so far. But why is it in organisations? It's to get people on board with the journey. That's why at EDF they've rolled out to over 100,000 employees internally. And the way they did that is they did not ask me to come there many, many times, as much as I'd be flattered. They trained their own people internally how to do it. Because once you've taken part in a workshop, you've done all of the prerequisites to get trained to become a facilitator. So the next step is you join a facilitator training, and then you can deliver, or someone can deliver workshops themselves. And it's very popular. People have told me it's their favourite part of their work, their favourite part of their job. And by that metric, it's really taken on board. People love doing it, and it's grown successfully to 90,000 facilitators around the world. This was a bit of a mega fresque in France, in Lyon. But more than that, that's not where it ended. So that's the story of Climate Fresque. We'll put these aside for now because I've got some other things to bring in, which is there were subject matter experts here, and they said, maybe I'm a subject matter expert in nature risk and biodiversity, and there's not enough of that in a Climate Fresque, or I'm an expert in adaptation and that side of things. So they said that was a really successful method. I'm going to take this method of cards and engaging people to do this train the trainer exponential model and apply it to different subjects. So we have it for the IPBES reports. We have for the planetary boundaries framework from the Stockholm Resilience Centre and more. There's many different workshops to get across these problems. There's not a removals collage as far as I know so far. So a big space. Because that's the issue of when there's complex information to get out there and it's hidden inside reports that people don't read, these games come in handy. So all of these games are independent in different NGOs that are inspired, and it's not these. There's over 200 different workshops that have been inspired and taken on this type of method and model from subjects like climate change, but through to specifically ocean biology, or there's some about diversity, and yeah, there's pretty much everything you could wish for. So if you want to increase your influence, or you want to help us increase our influence, the easy steps you can take are join in a workshop, use it to build in buy-in for a sustainability plan. If you're training facilitators, people become champions, because even if they start off as a bit ambivalent, by the time they've run the workshop a few times, they've worked with other people quite a few times, they become, they've really joined the preaching part of the assembly, if you know what I mean. It's good for kicking off projects, supercharging offsites, building common language and understanding. So if you didn't know about Climate Fresque, now you know. Thank you.
And Ash, you are going to be so excited to meet Stephanie, because she has just developed a game for removals. And it looks as though we have something going to happen here. So please chat in the break. That could be very exciting, especially with the developed network you already have. So wonderful. Now my great pleasure to introduce Allison Pobrislo, who is the founder of Prance Earth and Prance Ocean and Prance Earth News, and is building a new climate infrastructure for tourism, linking emissions data, nature restoration and guest engagement into a unified system. Allison, please come and tell us about the magic you've been creating.
Hello, I'm Allison Pobrislo, the founder of Prance Earth, a climate platform for tourism. Our tools help resorts decarbonize, support ocean conservation, and engage travelers with climate solutions. Tourism is extractive. It threatens fragile ecosystems and cultural heritage. It's 8% of the global emissions, and despite being a $9 trillion industry, it remains energy and resource intensive. Small operators lack tools. Their energy data remains siloed in PDFs and Excel spreadsheets, unanalyzed. The Prance software connects new stakeholders, Resorts transparently share energy data, conservation teams share ocean science with this new audience, and travelers easily fund projects through our interactive touchpoints. We're creating a new system of the travel experience, educating guests to become active in conservation. Our thesis is that tourism can lead a cultural shift to climate action, and we have a unique lens. As founder of the first technology platform for resort operations and guest communications, we've pivoted Prance into a powerful platform to help protect the environment. This is the first climate software of its kind. We connect resorts, cities, museums, airports, and conservation organizations. Our suite of tools includes energy intelligence, operations, conservation, and impact financing. Interactive dashboards automate energy accounting, analyzing data by type, cost, category, acreage, and guest volume. We track renewable energy projects, carbon offsets, and sustainability investments. Using our peer benchmarking tools, we're building a baseline to accelerate decarbonization across properties, portfolios, and entire industries. This data set represents 65 resorts, $200 million in energy billing across 15 years, equaling nearly 2 billion metric tons of carbon across scopes 1, 2, and 3. With AI-driven insights, we're identifying reductions that could cut 600,000 metric tons of carbon and 30% of cost, or $60 million in potential savings. Our ocean software connects local marine ecosystems and guests. Conservation teams use our platform to track and benchmark projects and engage the local community. We curate rich data experiences that help guests understand climate data and also an easy pathway to act. They can offset their footprint through verified local projects and even help fund resort decarbonization. In a new pilot, we're projecting 30% reductions across resort emissions per year and $200,000 in restoration funding. Our media division is Prance Earth News. We report on circularity and innovation across businesses and finance networks and nonprofits. In partnership with a Swiss news agency, we distribute this content globally. With years of licensing software to the luxury resort industry, we see a powerful opportunity to turn tourism into a driver of conservation. Thank you very much.
So we're going to move now to Gerbrand Haverkamp, the Executive Director of the World Benchmarking Alliance. And really the focus of the World Benchmarking Alliance work is really closing the corporate accountability gap. So Gerbrand, you're doing some wonderful work with the World Benchmarking Alliance, and I was very privileged to see your tool in action at the World Economic Forum this year. So thank you so much for joining us. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I am joining you from Seville, which is very hot, but more importantly is where the finance for development. That we do that is by assessing mentioned by the previous speakers like Microsoft, EDF, but all in all 2,000 companies that we assess. And these companies have a tremendous footprint in terms of emissions, land use, people working in the supply chains, ratio to GDP. So without these corporations moving in line with the Paris Agreement or the Global Biodiversity Framework, it's simply impossible to achieve these global agreed UN frameworks. And the big problem, and that, while that's sort of quite widely acknowledged, the big problem that we have is that the impact that companies have on people and planet is very consequential in terms of emissions, in terms of nature destruction, in terms of people working in the supply chains. but the other way around, the impact that these companies have has very little consequences currently to the success of business. So whether you're a company that is leading on climate or a company that is lagging on climate has very limited impact on your financial performance. And so in order to help fix this problem that sort of explains our focus on corporate accountability. Because corporate accountability effectively is a way of making the impact that companies have on people on the planet consequential to their success. Now, we do that by assessing these companies. We do that. That's where the tool comes in. So we develop methodologies, and we then assess the companies based on what they say and publish in the public domain. And then we create rankings and benchmarks that are free and publicly available to everyone in the public domain. So if you would go to our website, you would find assessments on these companies on the topics I talked about. And this data then flows, it's not just that, because we then make sure that this data flows into the hands of pension funds, regulators, and other actors in society that actually have influence over companies. And so that they can use in their engagement with companies. When it comes to investment decisions, business decisions, and regulatory decisions. Now, and a big sort of also important part of that is to make sure that this remains available as a public good, so that it's open and available to not to academia, to society, and to the public at large. And this is why our work is funded by governments and philanthropic organizations, so we can keep everything in the public domain. Now, when we come specifically to climate, the way that we assess companies, and this might also be relevant to people in the room, is that we are assessing companies through the lens of a transition plan. And so we're not only trying to understand what the company's commitment is to climate and looking at historical emissions, but very importantly, look at the amount of capital that companies are allocating to their energy transition, because we believe that that's the lead indicator for whether a company will be able to bend its transition curve over the next years. So for those working with companies and those that are trying to engage with companies, I think looking at the climate transition plans of companies is one of the key features to look at, to look if you're working with a company that's credible, not only in terms of its commitments, but also by putting the resources in it that are required for those companies to make that transition. That is, in a nutshell, what we do. Our work is sort of also nested within a wider alliance of about 400 organizations that are investors, civil society organizations, UN agencies. So if that's of interest to you, please have a look, because I think that is one of the, if we zoom out a little bit, and also for where I'm sitting now, is this huge conversation about how do we fund global development and keep the world within its planetary boundaries. That's a term one of the other speakers used. Is that we're living in a world where those that are most directly impacted by companies have the least amount of influence over companies. So one of our key things that we need to do is how do we bring people together, mobilize coalitions, so that together, through collective efforts, we do actually create that influence over companies, and we can make the impact that companies have on us every day, every year, also make it consequential to their success, so that the companies that align themselves with where the world needs to go are also those that will be in the end be rewarded, and that there's a penalty for those that are lagging behind. I thank you for this opportunity to address you virtually and to learn from the other speakers. And again, apologies if I couldn't be there.
We are so grateful that you gave us time when you're busily in the middle of negotiations in Spain. So we know there's a lot going on with financing. Thank you so much. And I'm just wanting to a quick check-in. Are you able to stay online for Berend's presentation, or do we need to give a question or two now?
If you want to ask me, I can stay until the hour.
Okay, that's perfect. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Oh, that's now. Okay, great. Are there any questions? We addressed a number of these issues in the finance panel earlier. and I wondered if there were any questions. Love this idea of mobilizing coalitions. Paul, I was wondering if you might have a question given the presentation you did earlier. Oh, microphone. Thank you, thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. Paul Minister from Tobo Finance. I know that as part of the benchmarking, finance is a part of that, but would you mind sort of explaining how that's happening and how you're both analyzing both the banks themselves and as well as if you're at all engaging with how companies are actually banking as part of their benchmarking?
Yeah, so you're right. So out of those 2,000 companies that we assessed, 400 are financial institutions and probably about 100 of those are banks. And what we're mostly focused on is how they are bringing their financing activities in alignment with their boundaries and with societal norms. Now, finance, and we do that, and we assess financial institutions at a group level. So if it's an insurance company, we both look at their insurance activities as well as their asset management. And if it's a banking, we look at retail banking and finance. So we look at the whole sort of group. I think what we're basically seeing is that financial institutions are really far behind when it comes to sort of their organizational transformation as a financial institution. So what they have sort of excelled in over the past years is finding financial solutions that help drive the energy transition, which is very, very helpful. But what they're still lagging is making transformation as an organization themselves. We do see some leading examples. I think ING is a very good example of a bank that is now really integrated into all of its businesses. But I think that those are leading companies. I think that is sort of, so if you look at sort of the next 5 to 10 years, what we really see is the transformation of finance itself, not just trying to find financial solutions to companies going through their own.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Any other questions before we let Gerbrand get back to his negotiations?
And
Great.
the next iteration of the finance benchmark and climate benchmark will all be published in the week before Davos, so January 6th.
Fantastic. We will be looking out for that, and I'll look forward to hearing the second iteration. Thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. Bye-bye.
Great, and now we move to Professor Berend Smit with the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne, who is a full professor of chemical engineering at the School of Basic Sciences, has been elected director of the European Centre of Atomic and Molecular Computations in Lyon, just a stellar, worked at the Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, really a stellar academic resume. And Berend, we know your research focuses on the application and development of novel molecular simulation techniques with an emphasis on energy-related applications. So we are so looking forward to your telling us a little also about the work you did in writing the textbook on the introduction to carbon capture and sequestration. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me and can you see the slides?
Yes to both.
Yes to both. Perfect. So my presentation will be on tools, but tools for science and for engineering. And I hope that can interest you and that they are AI-inspired tools. So the first one is actually quite interesting because here we borrowed from a technique that is often used in economics. So what is here the idea? The project where we were focused on is here. This is a carbon capture plant in Niederhausen that has a slipstream from the biggest coal-fired power plant in Germany, and they capture the CO2 there. And here there were chemical engineers, it's actually Susana Garcia, who will be presenting also in the next session. And what they did there is a sort of a stress test That is meaning they were really testing this capture plant under quite extreme conditions. And where they were interested in is measuring the amine emissions. And those amine emissions you need to control because there are limits of what you can do. And here you see some results that you really, they stressed it a lot because they increased the amine emissions enormously. But what they also did is because of these stress tests, is they stressed out the operator, and they had to intervene to ensure that this capture plant was operating safe enough. So what they then had measured in the stress test was an increase in the emissions. But then in the interpretation was, how can we interpret that? Is this due to the operators having to intervene, or is this due to our stress test? And yeah, the conventional engineering models really don't work for those kind of things because this is a too complex problem. Amine emissions are not very well understood. So the question is what to do. But fortunately, in their setup of the pilot plant, they did measure an awful lot of data. So the idea was to borrow from economics, where they then make a machine learning model that predicts in this case, the emissions, but you could also envision that as some part of the economy. For example, and the idea is you have a change in the tax code. And then the question is, if you follow the economy, what is then caused by the change of the tax code, and what is, for example, caused by the war in Ukraine taking place? Ideally, you would like to copy the Earth and have a parallel blank test running, but that cannot be done. So these type of tests are then done with a machine learning model, where you then compare what is the effect of the operators in this case and what is the effect of the test case. And what you now see here is this is an emission that is caused by the operators, and this one is say a real emission. And once you then have this model in place, you can also run scenarios with the most important parameters. And what you then typically see here is how are the emissions affected if we run, say, with the water wash temperature lower or in the lean solvent temperature higher, and you can sort of, with these scenarios, see how you can improve the plant. So that is one aspect. But what we can also do, and that is quite interesting, is look at optimum materials for carbon capture. And this is an interesting class of materials because they have an extreme tunability. These are called metal organic frameworks, and chemists can change the metal and they can change the linker node. And if you then make a back of the envelope calculation, you can make trillions of possible materials. And that is, of course, way too much to do the conventional trial and error. And it's also typically you have so much data, and there are so many materials that have used that you typically would like to use all kind of machine learning tools. So, for example, what you can do is you can generate these materials in silicon. You can then identify what are the top performing materials, and then use machine learning techniques to identify what in the top performing materials is common. So what we then have identified is what we sort of called an adsorber for that these are sort of called these rings, these benzene rings. If they are separated by 6 angstrom, you have a material that can separate CO2 very well in the presence of water. Well, if you have identified such a motive, people can synthesize it, and then you can actually test in the laboratory that its material is performing really well. So here you see a typical example where we use AI to identify similarities in the material and subsequently synthesize this material. So this is one of the first instances where you have use AI to actually design a novel material. What we can also do is make all kinds of predictions on properties of materials. So if you really want to lower the cost of carbon capture, you need a material, but you also need a process, you need to techno-economics and the life cycle assessment. And Susanna will present in the next picture a little bit more about that. In order to do this with so many materials, you do need all kinds of AI tools for that. And the way we use this in this platform is basically to predict all kinds of properties which are conventional methodologies can't predict. So we have, for example, an AI model that predicts the heat capacity of these materials. And what we also do is to improve the quality of our predictions, right, by using all kinds of machine learning false fields. And just to give you an example of how we use AI tools to drive the cost down of carbon capture, and that is sort of seen here. So this Prisma platform that evaluates for a given material the net carbon avoidance cost. Well, since we do DFT and all kinds of calculations, this is relatively expensive. So we cannot do that for too many materials, but we can do it enough to train a machine learning model where we can then predict for a much larger database what the properties are. Then we evaluate, and what you then typically see here is the materials we start with. And by the subsequent rounds of machine learning, we get better and better in predicting top performing materials. And this is sort of the way in which we have integrated AI tools in a machine in development of techniques to predict materials for carbon capture and to lower the cost for there. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, wonderful group of presentations. We have time for questions, comments, but thank you so much. Amazing to see what you're doing with AI. Wow, I hadn't thought of that application. So anybody with thoughts, comments? Yes.
Ian Hartley, the University of Exeter. With the AI design, have you thought also of designing materials that could remove other greenhouse gases as well as carbon dioxide, for example, methane from point sources as well?
Yes, that's an obvious thing, and that's something we're actively working on, not only from point sources, but also, sort of very dilute sources, which is actually quite important. And it's an even more challenging separation. So you really, with these metal organic framework, you have the potential to tailor-make materials that are optimum for a given separation. So if we can screen about those trillion of possible materials, we sort of guaranteed to have the best material for that type of application. And maybe Susanna will tell a little bit about that part later on.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, if there are not further questions, we will segue into the next panel. And we know Susanna and Netra Chetri are already online. And Martin, I'm going to pass over to you to moderate this. Berend, feel free, please, to stay with us virtually if you can. And we'll circle around and have a bigger section of Q&A at the end. Thank you all.
Okay, wonderful.